But abusers are classic. They have absolutely no problem belittling, degrading in a public setting. And honestly, we do have two types of abusers. We have the public persona and the private persona. And there are still abusers in public that want to keep up that good guy image. But there are also abusers in public that they don't care
Yeah.
who's around. It actually is one of their tactics of power and control. I can put you down and say what I want to say to you anywhere in front of anyone, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mhm.
And to be that person who's the one that's being publicly degraded, your sense of self-worth just gets lower and lower and lower when those kind of things happen.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
It's a really bad, it's a really bad situation.
It is. It's horrible. And again, just like all the other behaviors, it's inexcusable.
100% inexcusable.
It is totally thought out ahead of time. They know what they're doing.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. I'll get on my soapbox.
Go ahead, preach.
And then the rest of that over on the domestic violence side is forcing participation in demeaning or degrading sexual acts. And my ex did want me to do some things that I was not comfortable with. And it was very rare because I didn't really know how to do boundaries. And I said
Mhm.
no. And he said, okay. And it was consistently throughout our marriage that he was wanting that. And I consistently said no. So I was amazed.
Yeah.
Verbal abuse, put downs, or name calling. And he didn't really do name calling with me, but he didn't have to. He did
Right.
all the other stuff. And
Right.
it had its own power and control.
Yes.
Frequently tells victim that they are stupid, worthless, and unlovable. He never used those three words on me. But he didn't have to,
Right.
because in
He
his
communicated that to you all day, every day.
absolutely, that he was smarter, he was the answer, and if anybody wanted an answer to any question, they could go to him and he would give it to them.
Mhm.
So yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we're at the last one.
Okay.
Enforcing trivial demands. The focus of this is to develop habits of compliance.
Mm.
So, forced writing, which doesn't really apply in an abusive situation, or enforcement of minute rules. And so it's just the little stupid, nitpicky, um, I dropped this thing, you are going to pick it up for me kind of thing. I saw this, actually, I know a story that's horrible that I know a person that happened to in one situation where there was a little bit of a verbal dispute going on, and the abuser was smoking cigarettes, and the abuser or the victim grabbed the cigarettes and threw them on the ground, and um, the abuser said, "You pick those up," and she said, "No, I'm not going to pick those up," and he said, "You pick those up or I'm going to make you eat them," and she said, "I'm not going to pick those up," and I'm not kidding you, he held her down and forced cigarettes into her mouth.
Oh,
Mhm. So, I mean, it went from being a trivial demand to being physical abuse, but that's how much power that person had over his victim in that situation.
oh. There is, if there's one thing I hate, it's bullying.
Mhm,
And we've talked about that before.
mhm,
That is what abuse is. It's bullying to the nth degree.
mhm,
And it just makes my blood boil. Recently, I heard about an instance at school for one of my grandsons. And my son and I were talking about it, and I said, I hate bullying. And he said, oh, I'm right there with you. He said,
mhm.
believe me, I get you. I understand. Um, Enforcement of minute rules. That was just like a constant thing
Mhm.
at our house. Punishes for non-compliance with the rules. which are rigid and unrealistic. It was 24/7, 365.
And they change every day.
Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
These rules often govern the victim's appearance, housekeeping. Oh my word, housekeeping. Yes. Parenting, timelines, etc. I don't know if I ever shared this with you. So he would give a time that we needed to leave, let's say 4:10 in the afternoon, okay?
Mhm.
And so he would be out in the car waiting at 4 o'clock. Did I
Mhm.
ever tell you this story?
No.
So this was years and years and years of this because he knew I had an issue with being on time. And you know that because I'm not usually on time when we go to record, and you are on time. So I still have not conquered that, have I? But anyway, so finally I said, I'm gonna beat him at his own game. I'm gonna do this. So I finally really thought this through. How do I do this? So I began to be ready at 10 till 4. I was sitting out there in the car. And well, I was wondering where you were. I didn't know where you were. Well, I'm sitting out here waiting for you. What are you taking so long for? I've been sitting here for 10 minutes waiting for you. Whoa. Well, well, then all of a sudden it's no big deal. You see, I had made him look like an idiot, where all
Right,
this time he'd been making me look like an idiot. He didn't
right,
go for that very well, but it was, I finally conquered something,
right.
to some degree. So that made me think about that, the timeliness. The housekeeping, his mother was an exquisite housekeeper. I mean, there was never anything out of place. She would she did not have a job outside the home. And so she took it to the ridiculous level as far as in the
Mhm.
house. She ironed dad's pajamas, his underwear, his
Oh my gosh.
socks. Yeah, his socks. She ironed the sheets. She ironed the pillowcases. And I'm thinking, I mean, who can rise to that level? Okay.
Nobody.
But that's what he was used to. My ex was
Yeah.
used to. Well, you know what? He had to live with what he had because here I was trying to raise three kids,
Right.
and basically I did it alone because he wasn't really there to help me raise them. He really wasn't. He was
Yeah.
on the couch listening to the radio, watching TV, and reading a book.
Right.
Wow. And then once a week, he would mow the grass and usually take out the trash. That was his contribution besides fathering the children. That was it.
Mhm.
I did everything else. And so the housekeeping was always an issue with him. It was never to his standards that he grew up with. So there would be times that we would sit down to watch TV together and he would say, it's pretty dirty on the TV. It's really a lot of dust. When did you dust last? And I finally got to the point towards the end that I said, the dust rags are in the closet in there, and they're on the second shelf. You can go get one yourself and dust it. You know what? He didn't move. He
I'm
didn't
sure he
go.
didn't.
No, he wanted that spotlessly clean, but he didn't want to do it.
That was your job.
Hey, that's woman's work. That's
Mhm.
not. Yeah, right. Okay, so frequently tells victim that they are stupid. Oh, I already said that he never used those three words. Or no, I'm on the wrong
No, we're
one.
on the bottom one.
Yeah, we are. Okay.
Frequently changes the rules.
Oh, yes. Punishes for non-compliance with the rules, which are rigid and unrealistic. These rules often govern the victim's appearance, housekeeping, parenting, timeliness, etc. Frequently changes the rules. That was an all the time thing,
Mhm.
and plays mind games
Mhm.
all the
Right.
time. And
Mhm.
I did not understand that until I listened to Natalie Hoffman, started listening to her probably about 5 years ago. And I'm not real good about listening to her all the time, but I'm telling you, there's been one episode that I didn't really agree with her on, but the rest of them have really helped unpack that for me.
Yeah.
How he played those mind games. and I forget her terminology of what she calls that, but it's basically like just a verbal tornado, and they
Mhm.
just, go around and around and around, like I was telling regarding the date nights,
Mhm.
and there's no resolution to it at all. You end up in a worse condition than when you went out together, and so the kids saw that. They saw that nothing was being resolved, and yeah.
I mean, I think that's a telltale sign of an abusive relationship is the lack of resolve. There's always issues.
Mm,
There are always open issues. There's never closure. They're never resolved. And so as a result, they're always just right there under the surface all day, every day, to where somebody can say, how are you? And something doesn't sit well, and the issue just comes right back out. Like they're never resolved. And so when you never have resolution of anything, all you have is an open pot of turmoil that's just being stirred constantly.
mhm,
Healthy relationships recognize issues and then they seek to attempt to resolve. So then that thing doesn't have to be talked about every day for the next 10 years. That thing has been discussed and, in theory, resolved. Put to
mhm,
bed, doesn't exist anymore.
mhm,
But you can't do that with someone who's motivated by power and control. Their focus is manipulation. And so there's never going to be resolve. It always has to, all of it has to always be open, always.
mhm,
Because in order for any of these tactics to work, the ones we've talked about tonight, they all have to be right there below the surface to
mhm.
where the abuser can push the button on any one of them at any given time and then it erupts.
And
There will
it
never be resolve.
and I'm so glad to hear you say that because nothing was ever resolved, and
No.
I thought it was me,
Mm-mm.
because he would say, "Well, you just don't know how to forgive. You always say you do, but you don't know how to forgive." Oh, okay, so guess what? Then I take that guilt too, you
Yeah.
know? And yeah, there wasn't ever any resolution to anything, and I know we've talked about this little tiny aspect of what I'm gonna say, but I can't imagine how miserable that would be to be the abuser, constantly doing that, never having resolution. That was the one thing I wanted. After I got out from my dad's house and my stepdad's house, I thought, "Finally, I'm gonna have a healthy relationship, where I can thrive and just heal up from all these years of this nonsense." Mm-mm. It was worse than it had been in the other 2 houses.
Mhm.
Yeah, no
But
resolution
I would
ever.
think the abuser excels, revels in the lack of resolve.
Yeah,
The lack of resolve works to the abuser's advantage.
mhm,
Because if something is resolved, we can put it away and it doesn't affect you anymore, in theory. I mean,
mhm,
sure, things affect us, you know what I'm saying, but when
right,
you're the abuser, if you're over it, that tactic doesn't work anymore.
mhm,
So the resolve is not a goal that they're ever gonna seek because they can still use it against you.
mhm,
And so it may have happened 10 years ago, but I can use it against you today because it's never been resolved. And I know 10 years ago the effect that it had on you. And my goal for today is to get you to that place. And so I know this thing will do it. So we're gonna open it back up again.
mhm. And to me, my word picture of that is that it's each incident is like an open, infected, and even a cancerous wound
Mhm.
that never has been treated properly or even sutured or even a bandage put on it, once it's been treated because it was never treated properly in the first place.
Right.
So how do you get that healed up, taken care of?
You don't.
Mm-mm,
No. It never goes away.
mm-mm, mm-mm.
Yeah.
In fact, what it does is it gets worse and worse and worse, and it stinks more and more and more, and it becomes more and more and more difficult to deal with on a daily basis because of the pain being so much more excruciating every day.
Mhm.
Domestic violence, it's not the case that somebody's looking for you. That is where I got dropped into just total despair and
Mhm.
depression. And I just want to offer up that there are people that are willing to help you. And
Yes.
we've talked about that in previous episodes. If, try to be spontaneous and ready for the moment, if and when it shows itself, so that you can get your foot in the door, basically, to get to escape.
Mhm.
Um, and can you give us some creative ideas? Like I've heard things like handing a note to the dentist or
Mhm.
something like that. Have you heard of some creative ideas like
I want
that?
to highlight one that you actually did tonight, if you don't mind if I share your story.
No.
Because just before we started recording tonight, you had an acknowledgement that it's dark outside. And what did you say to me? If I don't go turn my porch light on, my neighbor's going to worry about me. And I'm not suggesting you're a victim of domestic violence in the safety of your own
Right.
home, but
Right.
that right there, somebody cares whether I'm safe or not. And so that light being on indicates I'm safe. That
Mhm.
light being off indicates that I'm not. It's a
Yeah.
classic example of it right there. And victims
Good
do
idea.
things like that all the time. If the window is open,
Mhm.
or I've heard people say if the porch light's on or if the porch light's not on. If you come over and there's coffee in the pot, like, whatever, if there's not coffee in the pot, that means something. And so again, yeah, there's all kinds of creative things that people can communicate. If in the middle of the day the kid shows up at your back door, let the kid in, call 911, or whatever that may be,
Mhm.
because there are still people who care. And so I don't want to leave on the bleak note that nobody cares, because people do
Right.
care. But when you're in the
Exactly.
victim in that situation, you're not
Mhm.
necessarily sure that anybody's going to come a look in if
Yeah.
you disappear.
Yeah.
And I think victims are incredibly resilient, and they communicate things that way all of the time. Like you say, passing a note in a doctor's office, or um well, what's the symbol? I've heard there's a symbol that they've created that you're a victim of domestic violence if you have a symbol that you have on your hand. I don't remember
Yeah,
what that is.
when you have a picture taken that's posted, and I can't remember what it is now.
I can't either.
But it's something to do, you hold your fingers a certain way, and it says, basically, it's saying, "Get help. I'm being
Yeah,
abused."
yeah.
Do you remember the one we talked about in one of our very first episodes? It was a long time ago, and there was a lady who called the police
I was
department.
just gonna say that, and
It
ordered pizza.
Yes, and
Mhm.
ordered pizza, and
Yeah.
they rolled with it,
Mhm.
and they realized something was really not right. And
Mhm.
so she told them where to deliver the pizza, and
Yeah,
they did, but it wasn't pizza they delivered.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people throw out lifelines like that all of the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have two things left that I want to say about this chart.
Yes.
First one, if you're a prisoner of war, in my mind, what that means is somebody's looking for you.
Mm.
Somebody on your team recognizes that you've been taken, recognizes that you've been held hostage, and they want to come along and help set you free. If you're a prisoner of war, somebody cares and they want to throw you a lifeline. If you're a victim of domestic violence, that's not necessarily the case.
No.
People don't want to get involved, even in the world we live in today. People don't want to
Mhm.
get involved in other people's business. Not everybody understands the dynamics of domestic violence. That
Right.
isolation piece that we talked about, number one, very first thing we talked about was isolation. You've been
Mhm.
isolated from your friends and your family and your loved ones. At some point, they're like, I guess they don't want to talk to me anymore. They're not
Right.
going to come look. They might, but the reality is, if the isolation is working the way the abuser wants, nobody's coming to look for you.
Yeah.
Nobody's hunting you out as the hostage to try to set you free.
Right.
You're just trapped.
Mhm.
That's the difference I see here, is there's actually more hope given to somebody who's a victim, who's a prisoner of war, than
Mhm.
somebody who's a victim of domestic violence.
Wow. That's quite a picture.
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to make that point. And then the second point that I want to make is the name on the bottom of this, R. Riddick, the person who revised this chart in 2012, who worked for the National Network in Domestic Violence, who put this project together, was a very dear friend of mine. and she passed away a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And so as I've been looking down and seeing her name, I've been remembering her. And so I just want to shout out to Reen and say
Oh, wow.
how much I love and appreciate her for the work that she's done over the years for victims of domestic violence.
Wow. Nice tribute to her. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're freezing up a little bit here.
Yeah, a little bit. I think we better get off of here.
The computer's telling us we're done, I guess.
I think so. I think so. Well, this has just been awesome tonight. Thank you. Um, Folks, remember that no matter where you are in this process, you're always free to soar.